ladies and gentlemen. Everyone can be seated. Sergeant Evans. If it's a boxing match, they would say round 4.
Yes, sir.
Give me some to sit on the witness stand. You still out there to tell the truth, sir?
Yes, sir. I promise you. Not going to
Yes,
be
sir.
too much longer.
Yes, sir.
See, John.
You may proceed. I'm sorry. Yes, sir.
All right. Now, after the man you're driving me crazy with this party, below that, the responses from Jay Martin, and the name Jay or Jimmy Martin is Jimmy Martin.
Yes, sir.
Same person. All right. And so it says, so this was up, $300 left, towels in Florida, had the concert there. Do you know anything about a concert or towel or any of that stuff?
No, I do not know what they're referencing. No, sir.
Okay. But it's there, and then it says, you want me to go to party, adult theme, but the party has kids. When is it going to be at an all-adult party, and how to plan around that? Also, got to plan around my contacts there. Then a rental. Now, you don't have any reference regarding when he would say contacts there, whether or not contacts would mean anybody that he knows in this area or.
For me, no, sir. I've never interviewed Mr. Martin. I don't know what he would be referring to.
All right. And it says, so is it okay to throw the party outside? That's Sherra's recommendation, right?
Yes, sir. That would be her messaging Mr. Martin.
Now, she's not referencing Billy that lives in that area or anything. She's referencing Jimmy Martin, who lives down in Batesville.
Yes,
right?
sir. Yes, sir.
All right. And then it says, I gotcha. All right. Then down here it says, kids in, adults out. Let me know what you think. What date is that?
That is on July 7th, 2010.
Now, how long before Mr. Wright was murdered was that?
He was killed on the 19th, so about 10 or 12 days.
Right. And this is a conversation going between Sherra and her cousin, right?
Yes, sir. It is.
And then it says, don't know, just connected about the noise and the neighbors. Then he sent another one. What did it say?
At the bottom, it says, but it'll have to work if no other way. He's concerned about noise in the neighbors is the one before. And then below it, it says, basically, it'll have to work. There's no other way.
And she expressed that she wanted it, the concern about it being inside or out, right?
Yes, sir.
And that was his response to it.
She's concerned kids in, adults out. Let me know what you think. Yes, sir. His response would be, don't know, just concerned about the noise in the neighbors.
All right.
And then he also responds back, but it'll have to work. There's no other way.
Just from your investigation, you know if he was killed inside or out?
He was killed outside.
Outside. All right. And then again, you have Sherra texting him, correct?
Yes,
or
sir.
messaging him.
Yes, sir. She messages him, cool, I love you, thanks for everything. She misspells it and then corrects it in the one below it. Everything, I owe you. And the one below that. So that's on the 7th again. Then there's a gap to the 13th, and she says, what's up?
Now, it appears 6 days has passed, right?
Yes, sir.
And in that time frame, who does she send the what's up message to?
Oh,
Okay.
she's still sending that message to Jimmy Martin.
All right. And then we still on, right?
Yes, sir. She sends that to him, too.
All right.
That's on the same day, the 13th.
And then says there's a big response, right? Or a bigger response than the other messages. Okay. All right.
That's me. I'm
Okay.
going to not be connected to a TV.
All right. Yes. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
All right.
So yes, sir. On the 14th of the following day, Mr. Martin responds to her. You want me to read it?
Yes, if you will.
Mr. Martin responds, tying loose ends, moving studios, change off plan. Ya artist can't find any equipment. He can trade or sell my big keyboard. That what I'm trying to do. The other two are cool, but I need a 9-inch studio monitor.
Now, who is he saying needs the 9-inch studio monitor?
He said, there says, but I need to be referring to himself.
All right. He needs a 9-inch monitor.
He's referring to himself that he needs a 9-inch monitor.
All right. And it says
The next it says, don't want to PPL sweat and stuff bumping in the bumping up in the non-AC joint.
Is it burning or pumping?
Burning.
Burning up in the
Burning, yes,
AC
sir.
joint, right? It says we're gonna have to rent something to haul all this,
Yep.
and that is what date is that sent?
That's on the 14th of July 2010.
All right. There's too much hassle cleaning up. Don't want to be riding dirty. Then the money got to cover our ass. All right.
Yep. Yes, sir.
Doesn't sound like much of a party, does it?
It'd be speculation, but I'm not sure what they're talking about.
All right. We don't know.
I can't testify to what they're talking about, yes, sir.
Seems like Jimmy's gonna have to testify to that, right?
Yes, sir.
All right. You need money for something. I got $200, right?
Yes, sir. That would be Sherra on the same day, the 14th, sending him that message.
You need money for something.
Question mark?
I got $200, and that's on the 14th as well.
Yes, sir, it is.
What's 634.56?
So that's actually, this was not converted from UTC time, so that shows the actual UTC time of that message. So it was not converted from UTC to Central Time Zone.
Okay.
So you'd have to do minus 6 hours from that to convert it if you wanted to convert the time.
Okay.
So the messages are stored in UTC time, not Central Time Zone.
Is the date right on there? 7/14/2020. Do you have any reason to think that date is off?
No, sir, I do not.
But the time might be.
The time might be off by 5 or 6 hours, depending upon daylight savings, so you may have to minus 5 hours.
Okay. And then down here it says try to find the monitors. Those are speakers. Everybody use them. I can't find them around here. Can't afford new ones. Let me know. Now that's Jimmy to Sherra, right?
Yes, sir, it is.
And then her response doesn't come until what
She
date is
doesn't
that?
respond to him until the 21st of July 2010.
All right. And down there you don't know who the auntie would be, do you? Or what the auntie might have, or anything about the auntie on the green.
No, sir, it would be speculation.
Right, and that's on the 22nd.
Yes, sir, that's on the 22nd.
And finally, from Jay to her, can you tell me what that says?
You found it, and then it just says what's good, and that would have been on July 23rd, 2010. He says you found it, and then it jumps. There's nothing between July and September is the last one that says what's good.
And you don't know what he's referencing or anything, right?
That's what I can't testify to.
And once again, this seems like something Jimmy's gonna have to clear up.
Yes, I can't testify to it, yes, sir.
All right. Okay.
We proceed with the redirect.
Don't throw anything at me, 'cause it's been up there for a while.
Yes, sir.
I've got a couple things that I need to ask you, and Jurors had a question too that I think ties into this.
I apologize.
Well, I think I can tie it into it, it's fine. But, so,
Let me read these for you.
Okay, yes, sir.
Mr. Hager might have some follow-up on it. If he can answer these questions, he may do so. I did not want to interrupt Mr. Perry's cross-examination, so before Mr. Hagerman asks questions on redirect, let me read these. I want to interrupt his redirect. The jury asks questions, we'll read it exactly as it's written. Quote, please clarify whether calls from a payphone to cell phone, comma, under 45 seconds, comma, were connected.
Okay. So, calls to so from the payphone to the cell phone, we can't answer if it was connected or not as far as if someone picked up the phone and talked. All we show is the duration of the call was 45 seconds. Based on the records themselves, no, I can't answer that question as to if it was someone picked up, said hello, I'm here, I'm not here, I need a ride, I'm over here in Batesville. I can't, that would be all speculation. The records only indicate that the call was placed and then that the duration of that call was 45 seconds.
Second part of this question, quoted again, quote, does the 45-second rule in parentheses, close parentheses, only apply to calls between cell phones, comma, or also to cell and landline calls, question mark?
So the duration of calls, again, without actually having the physical phone and us examining the phone. So we look at the phone itself, we can see answered, not answered. Or if we're on a wiretap, we would know if they picked up the talk. All we're getting from these records is a duration. I could make a phone call this afternoon and I could basically say, hey, I'm on my way home. All right, I'll see you in a little bit. Bye. It could be 30 seconds. Or I could not answer the phone, and it could be 38 seconds, and it goes to my voicemail. So based on the records themselves, I can't testify that if the call was answered or not answered. All we can show is that the call was placed, the call was there, it was in the duration of that call lasted that time.
Second question, two-part question that are all interrelated, so I read it all at one time. Quote, could Sherra Wright determine whether or not social, text, Google, or other individually unique data was assessed coinciding with call times? In other words, did the phone user access Facebook IM immediately before or after making a call on July 19th or 20th, question mark?
I need to know which person they're referring to. If they're referring to, they don't say. So back then in 2010, no, we do not have Mr. Martin's phone to analyze that, to compare the phone with the call records. We would love to have both to validate each other. We don't have the phone. I don't have Mr. Turner's phone from 2010 either to be able to validate his records. So we only have half the story. I mean, we only have the half that the cell phone carrier provided us. So I can't tell you if he was utilizing data. I don't have his phone. We didn't analyze his phone. The only phone that was looked at back then was Sherra Wright's phone. So unfortunately, we would love to have had his phone and examined it and see what activity was on it, but we didn't have it. So from there, we don't have Mr. Turner or Mr. Martin's phone. We can't validate or verify what's found in the phone versus what's in the records.
Mr. Hagerman, you may proceed.
Sure, 5 areas of questions, and that was the first area having to do with limitations. Okay, things that limit what you can say versus can't say.
Yes, sir.
So we're on the same page?
Yes, sir.
Right. So you mentioned, we'll start with what was just asked about Facebook, for instance, because we've seen some Facebook, is that correct?
Yes, sir, we have.
And the Facebook we've seen came from whose records?
Those are from Jimmy Martin's Facebook.
Those came from Jimmy Martin's Facebook records?
Yes, sir.
And is it true that those are the only Facebook records that were obtained in the investigation?
To my knowledge, yes, sir.
Okay, so we don't even have Sherra Wright's Facebook records, is that correct?
To my knowledge, no, sir, we don't.
We don't even have Billy Turner's Facebook records, if he even has Facebook. We don't have his records, do we?
No, sir.
Okay, so the only Facebook records that we have for you to even begin to look at were Jimmy Martin's.
Correct.
And now, 12 or 6 or even 2 years later, you can't go back in the past and get those records now.
No, sir.
Records are retained for certain periods of time by certain companies, and if you're outside that time, then you're just outside that time.
Yes, sir, we have to go with reference Facebook for that. Yes, sir.
So the only records that we have with regard to Facebook is Jimmy Martin's.
That's correct.
So if we think of the 3, Jimmy, Billy, and Sherra, we have a third of the Facebook picture.
Correct.
Now, I think one of the jurors' questions also touched on this. With these phone records that we're looking at, we'll talk about the limitations of the phone records in other ways here in a second, but do these phone records that we're looking at, would they show, for instance, my phone records, if I Facebook message somebody, would the Facebook instant message show up on the phone records?
That's a two-part answer. So if you're today, in 2010, I'm not 100% certain.
Yes,
Today, if we were looking at that, it may show up as a data session on your phone. So if you look at AT&T you would have that voice, data, and SMS. And if you're using data, your data session would only tell us that there's data session. We don't know what's going on with the data session. It could be you using Facebook. It could be you looking at the weather. It could be you live streaming this court right now. We wouldn't know. But on the records that we have obtained, Mr. Turner, all we have are voice calls. So we wouldn't know if he was utilizing Facebook or any of that right, at that time.
And then there's other ways to message people too. Isn't that right?
On their phone, on your phone, yes, sir, there are. But you can download an app, and I can create another phone number, and I can message you with that phone. It would never show up on my records as far as a message record. It would show up as a data session.
Okay. So it would be fair to say that your testimony today, yesterday, we'll be over today, we promise.
Yes, sir.
But yesterday and today is limited to the extent that all you have are phone records for Sherra, for Billy, and Jimmy that may not reflect all the communication they actually had during that time period.
That is correct.
And we're not talking about in-person communication they had, because obviously this doesn't reflect that.
Yes, sir.
But it may not even reflect all the messaging or Facebook messaging or any sort of other app or whatever messaging that went on.
Yes, sir.
Now, you mentioned it before, even the phone records we have standing here in 2022 for Billy, Jimmy, and Sherra are in some ways incomplete.
Correct.
In fact, you testified that if it were you doing the investigation in 2010, you would have went back and requested a longer time period of records for these three individuals. Is that correct?
That's correct.
In fact, we only have a short time period.
We only have about 31 days.
And for instance, we don't have the entire month of June, which preceded July, obviously, the year of this homicide.
We don't have any of that for Mr. Turner or Mr. Martin.
So a question like, where was Mr. Martin's phone in June? Could it have been in Atlanta? Do you have any basis for answering that question?
No, sir.
A question like, where was Billy Turner's phone in June? Could it have been in Atlanta? Do you have any basis for answering that question?
No, sir.
If you have the records, if you had the records, maybe you could have.
Yes, sir.
There was no way to go back and get them.
No, sir. Not when I was brought into this investigation, those records were already done.
Now, you also mentioned another limitation with regard to Billy Turner's records. Do we even have complete records for Billy Turner starting in July to August of 2010?
Records were voice records only. We don't have the text messages.
So if I'm Billy Turner and I make a phone call to the deputy in July of 2010, is that going to be recorded in the phone records?
Yes, sir.
But if I'm Billy Turner and I send a text message in July of 2010 to the deputy, is that going to be recorded in the phone records?
No, sir.
Okay,
Not
so
the ones we have.
we're seeing a limited amount of information with regard to Mr. Turner's phone records.
Yes, sir.
And with regard to all three in terms of we're only seeing the month of July.
Correct.
There was a line of questions that were still with regard to limitations, asking about GPS. All right? How I understood the question is there are times when called as an expert witness, you could testify that my device was at a particular place, a GPS coordinate, at a certain time. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
Can you do that based on phone records like the ones you got, or do you have to do that based on actually having somebody's cell phone after the fact?
In this instance, it would be more after the fact. We can't do it off the records that we have.
Okay, so
Yes, sir.
is there any way anybody could look at the records that we have for Jimmy, Billy, and Sherra and tell you GPS where any of them are at a particular time in July of 2010?
Yes, sir.
That information is just simply not there. Is that correct?
Correct.
If you had Billy Turner's phone in 2010 and it could have been extracted in 2010, is that information that could have been pulled off the phone?
We wouldn't know until we got the phone and looked at the make model. It also could depend on if settings he had on his device. It could be there, but we wouldn't know until we examined it.
And-
If I went in and turned off my locations, it's not going to be on. It's going to be on. It isn't going to be on. So there's a lot of factors that play into that, but we would be able to at least attempt to locate that information.
And from experiences, from conversations we've had previously, isn't it true that even if you had the phone in 2010 to extract it, information may be on it, but it's less likely to be on a phone from 2010 than it is the phone that you and I are carrying around today.
Correct.
The phone that you and I are carrying around today, it's easier and much more possible to extract actual GPS locations.
That's correct.
So we do not have and cannot get GPS locations for Billy Turner, for Sherra Wright, or for Jimmy Martin from July of 2010.
Correct.
Instead, we have to rely on records that we do have, which indicate tower locations and directions. Is that correct?
Correct.
And from tower locations and directions, we can never get a GPS location, correct? We can only answer questions as to whether a phone this location is consistent with what we see on the records and where the towers and the coverage are.
Correct.
Also, when we look at these phone records and we ask ourselves or we listen to you as to where the phone is in terms of is it consistent with being in this area covered by the tower, on the side of the tower, okay? That person has to be using the phone, or the phone has to be receiving a call to get any information at all.
Correct.
Is that correct?
Yes.
Right. So, for instance, if my phone shows consistent with me being in East Memphis at 1 o'clock, and then the next thing you see on my phone is consistent with being in North Memphis at 8 o'clock. Right. Does that mean that I've been in either East Memphis, North Memphis, or somewhere right there in between for 7 hours?
No, sir. You could have been sitting in East Memphis for 5.5, driven to North Memphis in 30 minutes, and connected to a tower there.
You could have driven 2 hours away, driven 2 hours
You could have
back,
driven
popped
all
up.
over the place. Yes.
So the information location-wise that we're seeing is when the phone is actually utilized. And when I say utilized, I mean either placing a call or receiving a call.
Yes, sir. Your cell phone is always connected to cell towers, so the company knows where their phones are. But it doesn't register with that tower until either a call is placed, a call is received, a text is placed, a text is received, or in this instance, if you use data. So if you connect and get an update on your phone that the Tigers won the game today, and you would get that would be a data session. So that's the only way your records are going to indicate that at that time, and that's when it happens.
And with regard, because we've talked about it, there's been a question about it, with regard to the quote unquote 45-second rule. Okay, if I call you right now, you answer your phone on the first ring, and I tell you, man, I hope your testimony gets over with today because we've been here a long time. You say, amen, and hang up the phone. That duration is going to be less than 45 seconds, right?
It is. Yes,
But
sir.
we're going to have talked.
Yes, sir.
There are completed phone calls that could be as quick as 6, 7, 2, whatever seconds we want to put on. Is that correct?
That's correct.
But in reviewing thousands of records on hundreds of cases, when you look at duration, you know that a phone call can go unanswered sometimes. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And the record still indicate a duration of 45 seconds or maybe a little more.
Yes, sir.
Is that what you're saying about that?
Yes, sir. We look at hundreds of thousands of calls. So the standard would be that. But a call could last 2 to 3 seconds. Like I said, I could call my wife tonight and tell her I'm on my way home. She says, okay, we hang up. It's over. All we can tell you is that was the duration that's on the record. that the phone carrier captured.
So now I want to go back to this slide, and I want to go back. I'm not going to beat it to death. I want to be precise in our language because I think that addresses some of the questions. We are looking at the night of the 18th that has turned into the morning of the 19th. Is that correct?
Yes, sir, we are.
And on this slide, we're looking at two colors. We got purple and we got aqua. Is that right?
Right?
Purple reflects Billy Turner's cell phone coverage and the towers that cover him. Is that correct?
That is correct.
And the sides of the tower that cover him.
Yes, sir.
Is that correct? And this is Billy Turner's house right here.
Yes, sir.
Is that right? And we had talked previously about something that we call Billy Turner's home tower or home base or home side of the tower. We used a couple of different terms when we talked about it before. Is that correct?
That's correct.
When Billy Turner, is there a location? We said there is. There is a home base, home tower, whatever for Billy Turner. Is that correct?
What we would refer to that, when you're looking at thousands and thousands of records, if you want to start getting a bigger picture of where someone's pattern of life is, where they go, where they stay, where they live. We don't know where they live. We don't know where a suspect lives. We can look at tower locations. We can start searching what's the most used tower. Okay, well, we can run an analysis of that. And we can say, okay, well, it's going to be this tower that's listed here. And for him, it would be the tower that's closest to his home. I mean, that's the tower you use when you're in the house. So every one of us lives somewhere that's got cell phone coverage, and we would have indicative of that's probably the most used tower. Or if you go to work and you work in an office, and you're using your phone all day, it may be the work office. We just start to look at patterns.
Okay.
So that's why we use that.
The pattern we saw is Billy Turner's home tower is this shaded purple. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And his home's here on the edge of it.
Yes, sir.
And as you said before, these cones are demonstrations. Is that right?
Yes, sir. It's a visual representation to show you the direction of the tower.
Okay.
But in reality, go ahead.
I'm interested in two particular ways in which this is a demonstration and not a reality.
Yes, sir.
Okay. These straight lines here, in reality, aren't straight, are they?
No, sir.
There's overlap.
They would be more like a zigzag pattern based upon, it could be apartments, houses, buildings. It could be terrain, trees.
So does it make sense to you that even though Billy Turner's house is on the edge, just over the purple, does it make sense to you that this is his home tower nevertheless?
He's connected to that tower on that sector, yes, sir.
Okay, so that makes sense to you, this is his home tower.
Correct.
In fact, at 11:47 p.m. when he receives that text from Sherra, I'm going to need my commission, whatever it is.
Yes, sir.
His phone is consistent with him being on his home tower. Is that correct?
Based on the call on the blue box, yes, sir, there's a call at 23:47, so that's at approximately the exact same time as he's getting the text message. So yes, sir, it would be indication that at that point at 23:47 hours, he's utilizing that tower in the area of his home. Yes.
So consistent with home base.
Yes, sir.
Then, 27 minutes later, 2 minutes after the homicide, is his phone in an area that's consistent with being in the home tower?
No, sir.
Instead, has his phone moved?
Yes, sir. The two towers are about 2.87 miles apart. And so, yeah, the tower that's connected to now is going to be the tower that's in the Wendike Country Club facing north, and it would indicate that it has changed locations.
So in those
27 minutes?
27 minutes, his phone has moved from his home tower to somewhere else.
Correct.
And you've demonstrated, the shaded purple is the somewhere else area. Is that correct?
That's correct. So at 0:14 hours, that's the tower that it's connecting to, and it's facing north at this point, and not the other tower, which was facing more south. east.
And again, is this cone a demonstration?
Yes, sir. It's not the exact distance or coverage of the tower. It's just to demonstrate the area that's pointed in.
These straight lines going out actually have overlap, or not overlapping afterwards. We'll use overlap in a second. How would you describe the fact that these actually aren't straight? That there's going to be
So you're going to have side lobe and rear lobe, meaning they're going to go in a wave pattern out based on various things, and then you're going to see that it can expand way out and cover that sector.
okay. And then this final, like the limit to the cone, actually shouldn't even be there. Isn't that right?
No, sir. We prefer to have that really cut off, so it should just be a line, and then at the bottom you should see an arc, and then it's going to go out. So again,
this
we use
thing's actually going out.
correct.
See what I'm doing?
So yes, sir. It's think of a flashlight in the sense that the flashlight beam goes out and it doesn't just stay this perfect little cone. It's going to spread out, and then that's more the indicative of the radial wave because it's a radial wave. It's not a perfect line.
And so at 12:14, 2 minutes after the homicide, Billy Turner's phone is in an area consistent with the purple shaded or going out and the overlap.
Yes, sir. So we changed if you look at the bubble, we changed the distance. It may not be in there. So that's just a representation of 1.5 miles out. But that tower could reach out 2 miles, could reach out 2.5. I'm not sure. I can't testify to the distance. But that cone is just a representation to show a direction, and it doesn't just stop right there.
So the phone is definitely moved.
Yes, sir.
The phone is definitely not at home base.
Correct.
And then you've overlaid, there's a second color in here, this aqua color, is that right?
Correct.
And these represent Lorenzen Wright's cell phone coverage, is that correct?
That's correct.
Because he's on an entirely different network.
He's on the AT&T network.
So entirely different towers.
Yes.
C-Spire for Billy. C-Spire for Billy.
Correct.
AT&T for Lorenzen. AT&T for Lorenzen.
Correct.
And you looked at the 911 call, is that correct?
Correct.
And at the time of the 911 call, Lorenzen Wright's phone is consistent with being in this aquamarine color, and then it gets off 2 separate towers, this aquamarine color.
Correct.
And both of these aquamarine colors are right next to this purple color.
Correct. They intersect. Yes, sir.
And that's what that shows.
Yes, sir. That goes back to the honeycomb and the overlay that we showed on the first couple of slides, where you can see there's coverage. So the tower that's the beginning tower facing south, the ending tower is facing east, but that side lobe again, that rear lobe, you're going to have coverage of that tower to the left, meaning the ending tower. So the way those two intersect lines up almost perfectly with the way that where the homicide scene is, which is why it's hitting on 2 towers.
We can't say GPS.
Yes.
We can't say longitude and latitude of a particular place on this earth, right?
Not only just the cell towers themselves.
But can we say that 2 minutes after this homicide, Mr. Turner's phone its location regarding the tower is consistent with being in the same area as Lorenzen Wright's cell phone at the time he was killed?
That's correct. It's in the same geographical area. Yes, sir.
Toward the further into your PowerPoint, you looked at another day, a couple days after the homicide, on July the 21st. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And you're asked questions about it. What you looked at, is it consistent with Sherra's phone being in Memphis on the 21st?
I didn't look. her information's not up there.
Okay, well, on the further on the slide, we look
Yeah.
at
Billy and Jimmy's.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
On the 21st, is it consistent with Billy's phone being in Memphis on the 21st?
Yes, sir, it is.
Consistent with Jimmy's phone traveling from Batesville to Memphis on the 21st?
That's correct.
Are there times on the 21st that they show
Go on.
location consistent or near the crime scene?
You have to go back. We didn't, for Mr. Turner's phone or Mr. Martin? Mr. Martin's phone, yes.
Mr. Martin's phone.
Yes, sir.
And when we talk about the 21st, I asked you earlier about limitations. Do you see gaps on the 21st in Mr. Martin or Mr. Turner's or both cell phone in terms of what we talked about before? I'm in East Memphis or North Memphis, but a long time has passed.
Oh, yes, sir. Mr. Martin's phone has got 3 to 4 hour gaps.
How about Mr. Turner's phone on the 21st?
I'd have to go look. Well, hold on. I can look at these. You have some, 30 minutes gaps, maybe an hour, but not. I don't know if I can see. Do you see?
Yeah, if you'll refer to that slide that's before. Yeah.
So there, yeah, you got the 1239. Let me look at that. Yes, sir. There's the gap from 1239 on the 21st to basically 1434. So you got about a 2 hour gap.
About a 2 hour gap. If I told you earlier in the records, there's another hour and a half gap.
Yes,
That
sir.
makes
I was looking at the
sense.
wrong day. That's why I didn't see it. But yeah, there's a 2 hour gap.
And so during these gaps, like we said before, since the cell phone is not being utilized, we don't know where it is or where it's gone.
No, sir. It could be anywhere within 2 hours. Yes, sir. We have no idea where it is during that time.
When you receive records, and I should have went to this at the start. When you receive phone records, it's actually not what the jury is holding in their hands. Is that correct?
No, sir. It's not.
I think you've made mention of it before. You receive what's called raw data,
Yes, sir. I do.
and would it be fair to say that raw data contains more information than what's contained in the printouts that the jury's looking at?
Oh, yes, sir.
And it conveys more information to someone who's trained and whose expertise is to look at raw data. Is that correct?
Yes, sir. What was provided to the jury is a cleaned up version of that. Meaning it has less rows. It has more layman terms. It's easier to read.
And if you were going to base an expert opinion as to where somebody's cell phone was and what it's consistent with, would you ever do that off this, or would you want the raw data?
I want the raw data.
Okay. So that's what you did in this case, is actually the raw data was analyzed.
Yes, sir. We looked at the raw data and we verified what's in the system for our pinning system. But yes, sir. We looked at the raw data.
Mr. Perry started with looking at what you were calling duplicate calls.
Yes, sir.
Do you know what I'm talking about?
I do.
All right, because I don't know what you're talking about, because I've never heard anybody tell me what it was. I saw what y'all are talking about. There appears to be a phone call, and then maybe during the duration of that phone call, a second call between the same people?
It's not truly a duplicate call, it's a duplicate record. So meaning the cell phone carrier just duplicated that record. So got a call at 10 o'clock this morning for 3 minutes on my records. You see another one right below it for the exact same date and time, exact same duration. It's just a duplicate record. It's not 2 calls being placed at the same time.
Okay.
So sometimes the cell phone carriers, they show duplicate records. We have one carrier that constantly shows duplicate records, so it's what the carrier says.
And I think on some of the duplicate records that we looked at with Mr. Perry, they would show different towers. Is that correct?
It shouldn't. No, sir. I believe.
I think they would. I think if you look
They could have.
some of the ones we went over earlier.
Objection, Your Honor. Yes, sir. He believed and he suggested the answer. He said, I don't think that they would necessarily.
No, that's the answer. And what Mr. Hagerman is doing is getting a clarification because Mr. Hagerman remembers, and I can't comment on what was said, is that he believes there may have been instances that were asked that showed duplicate records on different towers. Who's asking to clarify that? And if it isn't, he'll say there isn't.
Yes, sir.
If you look at page 1, you can see that the.
This is on Exhibit 71, I believe. You wouldn't know.
I wouldn't know.
Yes, sir. Exhibit 71.
Well, you can see the first duplicate call on page 1, and it's going to be at the time would be 0. It's going to be on the 5th, July 5th, at 01:49. It's going to be in the morning. It's 01:49, 18 seconds. It shows 28 seconds. There's a duplicate record right below it. I'm sorry, that's not right. Let me find one.
Go to page 3.
What time?
Page 3, I made a notation when Mr. Hagerman was asking, I'm sorry, Mr. Perry was asking question 105939. Morel Hampton, the call that Mr. Perry asked you about.
Okay.
What time did you say?
105939. 76.
Yep.
2010. Apparently, it's 2 calls from Morel Hampton at the same time. Apparently, is what Mr. Perry asked you about.
Yes, sir. So that's the duplicate record.
Yes, sir.
That's what it's showing. I would need to actually look at the raw data to validate that that is the duplicate record. I don't know if our system PinLink may have just duplicated it. The records could have been entered 2 or 3 times, and they could duplicate it. So I need to look at the raw. I have to look at the raw data to verify that particular one. But what that's showing here on this paper is, yes, sir, a duplicate call, and it is showing different towers. Yes, sir. It shows it's connecting at 249 and connecting at 106.
And so that shows up on the record, some sort of duplicate record, like you said,
Yes, sir.
and it's showing 2 different cell towers.
Yes, sir.
That makes me nervous, but let me ask you this question, okay? Do you see any duplicate calls at the critical time of the homicide with different cell towers going
No, sir, we do not.
on? Was that raw data, was that checked and looked at, marked?
Yes, sir, it is. Yes, sir.
So do you have any reason to doubt the accuracy of any records or cell tower locations for the night of the homicide or the morning after?
No, sir, we do not.
And there's no duplicate records in that time period with different cell phone sites or anything like that?
No, sir.
I have no other questions.
Mr. Perry, before you ask any questions, if you have any recross, I'm going to answer these 2 questions from the jury.
Yes, sir.
If you can answer these questions, you may do so. And the jury has prefaced this with, what about call, read it exactly, quote, what about call records for Sherra Wright's phone, question mark.
If they're referring to the night of the incident, the night of the homicide, those records were analyzed. They were not included in this presentation. She has no cell tower usage or no usage during the time of the murder. So her phone showed to be at home before the 11:45 time frame that we've been focusing in on. And then there's nothing in the middle of the night or morning hours of the 19th. And then it shows to be back at her home on the early morning hours of the 19th. So she does not have, it's almost as if the phone never moved. So the phone was there, like when she went to bed, the phone's there essentially, the phone's there the whole time. So there's no tower locations around the homicides.
Second question, and the jury has indicated you might not be able to answer this. I'm going to read it also as written, quote, probably cannot be answered by Sergeant Evans. Was Mr. Wright's body found based on phone records, question mark?
Yeah, permission to approach.
Yes, sir. Let me rephrase the question. Read it exactly. Ms. Perry wanted to know if I was editorializing when I say that probably cannot be answered by Sergeant Evans, but this is the question itself as written. Quote, probably cannot be answered by Sergeant Evans. What's two little dots? Was Mr. Wright's body found based on phone records, question mark, close quote. So this is that quote from the jury, question from the jury. They're indicating that you probably cannot answer it. If you can answer it, you may do so. If you cannot answer it, you can let the jury know that you cannot answer it.
I was not part of that, so no, I can't technically answer that. I can't relate to that. I know that I believe cell tower information or a 911 call was used to help identify that he was missing or that something was going on. But as far as the records, I can't answer that.
Mr. Perry, any additional questions on cross-examination?
Yes, Your Honor.
You may proceed.
Sergeant Evans, what's your definition of a geographical location? Or geographical area?
So the geographical, for cell tower purposes, the geographical area would be the area that is in the sector or around that sector based on the tower itself. And then it would be the outreach or how far out that area goes. So a geographical area wouldn't be, this is your geographical area, it's not going to be behind you or 2 streets over.
Can it be 2, 3, 4, 5 miles?
Again, we can't testify to the distance of the tower that you're questioning or referring to. We can tell you that it was pointed in that direction and it was going that way.
You can't say, and you were asked a question a few moments ago about, well, we think it was the same geographical area. This room is a geographical area, right?
Yes, sir.
Right, but I guess from here to the what used to be the First Tennessee building, that could be a geographical area downtown, right?
The geographical area of his house and the geographical area of the homicide scene are 2 different geographical areas. Yes.
Right.
Yes, sir.
From right here to the Mississippi River, is that a geographical area?
Depending upon how far you want to make it out, yes, sir.
Right, and from here to, I guess, Germantown could be a geographical area, right?
Could be.
So that's an undefinable or at least an unfocused term when you say, well, they're in the same geographical area. Right now, I'm in the same geographical area, technically, as a person that's in my office in Mississippi, right?
Yes, sir. When we're referring to cell tower records, the geographical area would be the area that the tower is pointed in, and it would be based on that sector and that direction of the tower. So that would be what we're referencing to as a geographical area of that area. Now, we're not saying the whole city of Memphis. We're saying that if we move to another tower, another direction, another sector, that'd be the next geographical area. So with that date and time of July 19th, or July 19th at 14 minutes after midnight, that's the geographical area that the tower was pointed in. And
So-
that's the area that we're referring to.
So there could be some 20,000 people in that geographical area, right?
There could be a lot, yes, sir. I don't know the number.
But it could be more than one person.
Yes, sir, that's correct.
All right. And so in that, when you say geographical area in response to that, you weren't defining that as to that field or Hacks Cross Road, any of that, Callis Creek. You weren't saying that's the geographical area that Billy Turner was in that evening.
No, sir, we're referring to that geographical area being that side of the tower and the device connected to that side of the tower.
On the, I know a few moments ago, Hackman asked you a few questions regarding the, I think terminology that I used related to sectors, et cetera. The sectors that we're talking about here are those that are in that those cones that you were drawing or what have you. You weren't drawing those cones more favorable for Mr. Thomas and myself, were you?
Those cones aren't drawn or defined by me. That's the way it comes out. So the way it works is you look at the raw data. The raw data gives you what's called an azimuth and a beam width. That information is a hard number. It's not something that I come up with. And so it then tells you, okay, it's at 245. So that's the direction of 360 circle. We go around 180 at the bottom. We get to 245. That's the direction it goes in. I don't indicate and have any preference for you or for the prosecution or for a juror. I'm just reading what's provided to me by a cell phone carrier.
Do you put the data into the software?
The raw data from the carrier is entered into the software. Yes.
By whom?
Yes, sir. It's a Excel document that's loaded into a program.
Who loads it?
I load it in.
All right, you load it in.
Yes, sir.
Right? And so those cones that we saw, they were loaded by you, right? And in loading those cones that were loaded by you, there's never a time that you see a sector that Billy Turner is in at the same time as the dot that Lorenzen Wright is in.
Again, I can't answer that because
I know.
we've been down the road, but all I can tell you is that it's the sector that tower, the sector face. We don't know the distance of it. It's in the general geographical area, and it goes out, and that's how where the device is connected.
When you put the raw data into that machine or into the software,
Yes.
it didn't place a dot belonging to Billy Turner at the same sector that the dot belonging to Lorenzen Wright. It didn't do that.
It doesn't put in docs. No, sir.
It didn't put phone usage on that same area where we're talking about, Callis Creek. You put the information into a machine, but you couldn't draw the sector wider. You couldn't draw a cone wider. You simply had to take the information that you got from C-Spire,
Yes, sir.
place it into a data format, correct?
Yes, sir.
And you couldn't change that,
I don't
right?
think we don't alter that data. No, sir.
Right. You can't alter it. You can't favor it. You can't answer the question one way for one person and one way for the other. You can't do that, right?
No, sir.
All right. So what we're looking at, when you're looking at this, what you drew or what you provided, that's something that you can't alter,
No,
right?
sir, I don't alter that. No, sir.
Right. You can interpret it and you can talk to them about it and talk to us about it, but you can't change it.
No, sir, I can't.
I don't have any other questions.
Mr. Hagerman, any additional questions?
So obligated to ask one. I mean, I think we've asked this 5 different times.
Yes,
but
sir.
We can go back to these cones that everybody's talking about. You just take this one. It doesn't matter what slide. It doesn't matter what slide. We can just whichever one. This cone is for illustration purposes. Is that correct?
Yes, sir, it is. It's only illustrating that that's the sector and the direction that the antennas and the radio waves are pointing at.
I don't know if I did do it with the stick or my hand, but the end of this is not really an end.
No, sir, it's not. It's just an indication that that's the direction it's going in.
The purple actually extends.
Yes, sir, it extends.
And these straight lines aren't actually straight lines.
No, sir, they're going to be almost wiggly. If we go back to the technology, you can see how it all goes around in a circle, like a blob. That's what it looks like. It's not a straight line at all. There's no way to make a radio wave be a straight line.
And this diagram shows Lorenzen Wright's cell phone at the time of the murder. We can call it geographical area, we can call it whatever we want. But represented, again, not the end of the cone, it actually keeps on going.
Yes, sir.
In this aquamarine area, these 2 towers.
That's correct.
Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
And Billy Turner's cell phone, again, not the end of the purple, no such thing as straight lines, in the same area as Lorenzen's.
That's correct. It's in the same area. Yes, sir.
Now, like Mr. Perry said, understand, you can't say that Billy Turner's cell phone is on the road Cal is cut off.
No, sir, I can't.
You can't say that is on the other side of the barbed wire fence in the field where cows cut off.
No, sir, I cannot.
But you can say that it's in this same area.
Correct.
That's all my questions.
Ms. Perry, any additional questions on cross-examination?
No, Your Honor.
Two more jury questions for you.
Yes, sir.
And again, if you can answer these, you may answer it. If you cannot, just let the jury know you cannot answer it. And I'm quoting directly, so there won't be any misinterpretation of anything I might say or may not say. This is a direct quote. Quote, what is the last call Sherra made on her phone on July 18th p.m. and at what time was it made? Question mark. And to whom? Question mark. Close quotes. If you can answer that.
I don't have those records in front of me, so I honestly can't answer that.
I'll show these. I actually have the digital records. They were all entered previously on that exhibit.
What exhibit?
This exhibit
45.
45, Your Honor. I
Yes, sir.
have them pulled up. I can pass them. I can pass my laptop forward if Mr. Perry and Mr. Thomas want to take a look at it before I pass it up. I think they verified that these are the correct records that are on the desk. Excuse me, desk.
Yes, sir.
I'll pull those up for Sergeant.
Sergeant Evans, Deputy Smith has given you what has been admitted as evidence exhibit 45. Admitted through Jay Browning. Phone records of Sherra Wright, Billy Turner, and Mr. Martin.
Yep.
And if there's anything in Exhibit 45 that you're now looking at parts of it, I don't need to see it.
Okay.
That can answer that question for the jury, and since it is an evidence, you may publish that for the jury.
Okay, so what we see here is the very last communication. Now, these are AT&T records, so this is not Billy Turner's records. These are Sherra Wright's records. So of course, again, your target number is going to be different. Then you have the incoming short message service, or SMS, on 7/18/2010 at 23:48 hours. And that incoming message is from Billy Turner and his cell phone of the 901-239-3322. That's the last communication on her phone on the 18th. That would have been reference to the text messages that we saw where she asked him a question, he responds with okay. We didn't see that on his record because we only got voice, so we didn't get the text messages.
And I apologize, I was writing something else, July 18, 2010, at what time, sir?
23:48 hours is what's on here.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
When you get through that, maybe
You
ask
approach.
questions regarding that.
Absolutely.
I didn't.
Yes, sir. I'll always ask lawyers whether or not they have any additional questions. Yes, sir.
That's the last record that shows for the 18th.
You can get that back to Deputy Smith, please, sir.
He may want to keep that if we have
He's gonna
Hang on to it. Put it down in front of you.
Yes, sir.
Second question, quoting directly again. How can there be two calls less than a minute apart but have 3 minutes duration? Question mark. C, page 1, and again, this is Exhibit 71. And the juror says, see page 1, July 5, 2010.
At what time?
12:14:48. Call that I believe is Murrell, Murwill Hampton. And a call underneath that, July 5, 2010, 12:15:24. And I believe what the jury is saying is that one call, the first call indicated to be 3 minutes and 8 seconds. And the second call indicated to be 3 minutes and 4 seconds. and having been received or placed, I believe those were incoming calls, within less than a minute of each other.
So, to answer that question the best way, more than likely what this is going to be is, make sure I got my times right, it's 12:14. With those calls
Yeah,
being,
I'm going to object to speculation. If he's saying more than likely,
Yes, sir.
he didn't speculate to any of my answers.
yeah, then no, sir, I can't answer. Let's go with that.
He cannot answer that question. Any additional questions, Mr. Hagerman?
Just we asked about, or the jury asked about the last call Sherra made, and that's what you just testified to, that 11:48 communication.
Yes, sir.
After that, what is the next call? When's the next time the phone is utilized?
As far as, there are multiple, and here it refers to unknowns, but as far as what we would call as an outgoing call would have been at 5:42 in the morning on the 19th. And that would be your next, there's no cell tower information, there's a bunch of unknowns. Doesn't have any call information as far as who called, direction, none of that, it's also unknown.
Okay.
So your next outgoing, or your next communication would have been, like I said, 5:42 in the morning. And that was an outgoing phone call.
11:48, then 5:42.
Yes, sir. So there's nothing in the middle of the night.
That's it.
Mr. Perry, additional questions?
I don't have that in front of me. I can look at it, but before I look at it,
Yes, sir.
I thought Teresa Walker was the last phone call that Sherra made.
They asked about the last communication, I think, on the device, or a call. You are correct on the phone call, yes, sir. The last communication was that. I was going with that.
Reading it again directly, quote, what is the last call Sherra made on her phone on July 18th p.m. and at what time was it made, question mark, and to whom, question mark, close quote, end of question.
There is an outgoing call at the exact same time that she's giving the message. It's in 23-48 hours. That is to Teresa Walker. We're referring to voice calls. Yes, sir, that would be it.
You have a number for Teresa Walker?
901-644-0052 was listed on here.
Okay, that's it.
Any additional questions, Mr. Hagerman? Jeff Smith. And that computer back to Mr. Schofield, please, sir. Sergeant Evans. Thank you for your patience.
Yes, sir.
I know it's been a very long 2 days. You cannot discuss your testimony with anyone or allow anyone to talk to you about their testimony. Thank you for being here in court for the last couple of days. And make sure you stay safe, sir.
Yes, sir.
Thank you, sir. Step down and watch
Would you
yourself.
like these?
Thank you, sir.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Yes, sir. Smith. This is Exhibit 71. Put that on the exhibit table. And I don't know who these duplicate records, or maybe the state gave those to Sergeant Evans. Give those back to Mr. Hagerman with Schofield. Council approach, please. Ladies and gentlemen, we're going to take a recess for a minute. I believe the state's next witness might be Mr. James Martin and Jimmy Martin. Mr. Martin has a lawyer, Mr. James Jones, and I need to contact his lawyer to make sure that Mr. Martin has a right, and he does have a right to talk to his lawyer. And we should, if Mr. Martin and Mr. Jones decide that he wants him to testify, we'll hear from Mr. Martin in a few minutes. So it'll be an appropriate time to take a recess for right now. Remember, the court's instruction cannot discuss the case amongst yourselves or with anyone else, and we'll start shortly. Yes, Smith. Right here, please.